Gil here at Sailing Vessel Dream Chaser, and last week we had a pretty extensive video showing how we were doing some exploratory holes in the coach house roof and looking for rot. I'll put a little link right up here to the video. Check it out if you haven't seen it first. This is kind of a continuation of it and goes into a lot more detail. But be sure to stay to the end. I'll let you know what we ran across and, frankly, the decisions we now have to make.
Hey guys, it's Debbie here with Sailing Vessel Dream Chaser. I know Gil usually is on the videos doing all of the talking and stuff, but today I'm going to do a project on the inside. Now that they've got the top side pretty well squared away, it's time to start working down below. I'm going to sand the walls in the salon, and we're going to apply varnish later on down the road. So this is what we're working on, or I'm working on today. Gil's working topside, working with the epoxy and doing the windows still. So see you later.
After last week's exploratory holes, it was time to cut the top layer of skin off of the fiberglass and really inspect the core and see what we're looking at here. So I'm going to start here with just cutting this with a circular saw. I have the depth set just a little bit thicker than I expect the top layer of glass to be. I find the easiest way to do this is to adjust the thickness of the blade, the cut, the way I want it, and then I use my thumb to hold the guard up. I start with it elevated on one side and then just lower the saw down into it, pushing in the direction you would expect. And it's just a matter of repeating that around all four sides that I want to cut open. So I like to pry this. I usually use a scraper and a screwdriver or a very small pry bar when I do this work. But I start at one side and I kind of keep working my way around it. What I didn't show on camera here is there's a couple times I ran the saw just a little bit deeper and I would cut through a little section if I didn't quite get all the way through the fiberglass. But this is the method I use as I pull this all the way around. Once you have it sort of 3/4 of the way over, it's easiest if you lift it up and snap it along the far line, which is what I just did here. Well, let me do my best to show you what I have here. You saw me pull the lid out. Clearly, you shouldn't be able to hear my fingers do that. And it's really odd. It seems to be somewhat isolated to this little strip right here. I don't know. I'm going to turn the camera around and kind of look at it while I show you. We'll see what we uncover in here. Well, son of a gun, I just realized I wasn't recording this and I just tore this up. It looks like, I mean, literally I can just peel each of the individual layers of plywood apart. Like if it's 5 ply, I could pull 5 layers. It does look like the wood might have been replaced right here at one point. It's a different color and there's a marked difference in what I have here. Wood brush goes right through, or a scraper goes through, versus this, which is solid. So, interesting. Let me clean this out of here. So now it's just a matter of cleaning up the work I had done. I just used the paint scraper to pull up the really loose pieces here. I wasn't trying to get all the core out, just the parts that were too loose. So as I got toward the aft side of this particular opening, I started noticing that the soft core went a little further aft than where I was. So I wanted to open this up a little further back and inspect what I had here as well. So that wrapped up a really busy weekend. That was Sunday, January the 28th. We finished doing the work. Deb was down below sanding. I was up top cutting that top layer of skin off. But I was a little concerned. The rot appeared to be just a little bit more extensive than the size of the opening that I cut. So I knew I needed to plan for some work the following week to maybe expand that and make that opening a little larger and see what we really needed to do there. And I thought this was kind of cool. I pulled up to the yard today and there's a really neat looking boat that's been here in the yard for a few weeks while we were having our work done. And it looks like they pulled it's a catch. They look like they pulled the spars off of it, and that's actually what's right here next to me. Not moving this too much, I have my camera sitting on it, but I'll show you in a minute. These things are massive. I mean, they look like a telephone pole or a tree trunk. They are solid. I don't know if it's Sitka spruce. I don't know what it is, but they are amazing pieces of wood right here, timbers. Yeah, let me pick up the camera and show you this. Look at that, just massive. And just to give you an idea on the size of that thing. And that's the smaller of the two. This is big around as my hand is with my fingers outspread. Yeah, I've come down to the end of them and they must be keel stepped because you can see on the side right here, the left and right, where it's still varnished or finished, and then you can see the upper portion, which I presume is what comes out of the deck. And then and yeah, you saw me walk from near the top of the main. Obviously they go up quite a ways there. Pretty amazing stuff. I came down to the boatyard to try and continue the work you started to see in the last video. If you'll recall, we did some exploratory holes in the top of the coach house. We realized we had some rot in there. Initially, it was a decision of, do I just pour epoxy in and sort of fill up the delaminated section, or do I remove the piece of rotted plywood or core? And in our case, it was a little bit bigger than I had initially anticipated, so we cut a piece off of the top skin of the fiberglass, and that's kind of where we left it. I now need to see if I need to make that hole any bigger and then start to clean out any of the core to put new core down in place. I talked to the yard, and I am going to have them skin over the plywood core that I do. I have normally two different options, and if you watch the video, I'll put a little link up here at the top in a minute, but if you watch the video on how to make your own vacuum bagging system, we did some repairs on our deck in the core, and in that case we cut a big piece of the fiberglass out, we lifted it up, put new core in, and re-glassed it back down, or re-epoxied it back down, and then left that as the repair, if you will. In this particular case, given its location and the size of it, honestly the labor is not going to be much different for them to clean up the outer edge before they fair and paint that roof versus having them just lay glass right over the section of new core. You know, it's about a 2 foot by 1 foot section, so it's not huge. The material cost will be, you know, minimal. So let's check it out. All right. Well, welcome aboard. It's kind of exciting. When I mentioned before, we haven't had a lot of progress on the work I've been doing over the last week because it's been really cold. But the boatyard has made a little bit of progress. And the first thing I notice as soon as I come on board is the gunnels have a layer of paint on them. So let me grab the camera, I'll turn around and show you a couple of the changes here. They're pretty exciting. First thing I noticed was the paper over the tow rail, which had me believe they had been doing some work up here. Now let me kind of scroll forward here. The first thing you notice is the gunnel is no longer that primered gray. And as I mentioned in our hull painting video, I'll put a link up above for it, the yard likes to put the first layer of paint on as a way to see where they need to do any kind of fairing or corrections in the surface. A shiny type of paint kind of shows those imperfections really well. They like to use that method to see where they have additional work to do. But more exciting than that is the coach house. So the coach house has a layer of paint on it, and it looks pretty amazing. And then the deck will all be a non-skid, a slightly more beige or off-white color than the actual superstructure. I kind of show down the sides. That's where it tends to show up best. From the port side, forward of the coach house, looking aft. Yeah, I love this. All right, this is the companionway section here. So I'm standing in the cockpit looking forward toward the companionway. And this just really does look good. Like I said, I'm gonna see if you can see it a little bit up the starboard side of the coach house. A little bit hard with the light where it is here, but looks really good. And if I were to step back into the cockpit and look up the port side, show you what that looks like as well. It does mean, however, my work on the top of the roof today is I'm gonna have to open this up to get to what I need to work on, and then close it back up to protect it from any overspray, because my section I'm working on is, well, right there, just to the left of the companionway. Well, you might remember this is about where we left off in the last video. I had actually drilled some exploratory holes in here. And as I just said, they made some progress on the boat, and because they were painting, they've covered everything with masking. So I'm going to try and slice this masking open in a way that lets me sort of fillet it open and then close it back up and just tape back over it again, reducing some of the time it would spend for the yard to essentially remask this, right? everything's sort of by the hour, right? So if I can save a few hours of labor, that's good for me. And the wonderful thing about working with these guys here is they're completely open to that kind of thing, right? They take no offense to it. I'm okay if I do this kind of work. So they've been great. So you can see I have my opening here, and what I am realizing is I am going to have to carry this over a little bit further. I still have a little bit more rot under the edge here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this small bimini attachment off so I can get as close to the edge of the companionway as I can. I don't want to go all the way to the edge, just makes it a little easier to patch if I'm run up against it. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and remove this piece. That could have certainly been another ingress point for water. You can see where there's caulk beaded up all around this thing, so who knows. I'm pretty good just about here, so I'm going to run my cut up to the edge of that. I forgot these last week. They're filthy, but good enough. All right, so I just went ahead and pulled this out of here, and it is truly an amazing difference. I want to show you this when we start talking about what bad core looks like versus good, right? This is good. This right here, you can kind of see how just this little section right here is bad. And it lets me get this repaired here. I'm probably going to trim a piece of this out, put new in. This is another one of the athwartship stringers. I can see the nails that were used to hold the 2 layers of glass down, or 2 layers of plywood together. But this is good. This is what I need to really get this thing looking well. Oosh. Clearly water intrusion, right? Here's the 2 nails. These 2 nails are 6 inches apart. This one, the color you would expect a galvanized nail to be. This one, rusted all the way through. So clearly water was getting in that spot under there. Could have been from that little leaking bimini cover. A lot of places it could have been coming from, but that's probably one of them that was likely. So what I've done is I've taken the circular saw and I've cut it a little deeper depth, and I've run right along this edge and then along this clean routed edge. It didn't quite go all the way to the end because I would hit here, so I've got to use my oscillating saw to cut this section out. But I want to remove that lower layer of plywood here as well, and then we'll go down below and we'll take a look at this bulkhead. I don't know if you can see this. I believe this piece right here that appears a little bit loose, I believe that is the top portion of that bulkhead that appeared to me before to have a bit of termite issues in it. So that's my guess at what's going on here. If that's the case, I want to get this piece removed. We'll go down below, we'll inspect it, and I think I can probably scarf a new piece of wood into that bulkhead, and then obviously make it just a little bit higher than the surface here, mate all of this really well, and make sure that that becomes part of the integral structure that we have up here between core, epoxy, and everything else. Any repairs we want to do, we want it to be permanently attached to this section just to reduce any future problems and sort of increase the strength, especially given that it's a repair job versus a complete replacement of an entire bulkhead, which is a major, major piece of work. Obviously, if I found that the termite issues went all the way down, I would be replacing it, but I know they don't because we had pulled the trim off the facing off of that bulkhead before to inspect it in the past. It appeared to be about the top 4 or 5 or 6 inches of it. So let's cut this off and see what we have. So I will tell you, this is very telling. What I just found is something I couldn't see down below because of the way it was done and what I've exposed earlier, but I can clearly see this is 2 different pieces of wood. There's a piece here, it's cut at a 45-degree angle, and then there's another piece here. Let me show you this. Forward of that is the aft bulkhead of the galley. Take a look at this. You can see this piece of plywood right here is cut at an angle and laid in here. This looks like it was a very well, I don't even know if I want to say scarf job. This is either a poorly done scarf job or an attempt to just hide an issue and cover it up. So I'm going to go down below and see how much further it goes beyond this. What's interesting is this piece, the new piece here, is pretty rotted. It could be from water or termites, don't know. However, this section still feels pretty good. So the scarf job might be a good approach. I just may have to clean up this edge and put a new piece in here. And frankly, if you scarf wood in like this, the first thing you do is you cover both sides of it with an epoxy or some kind of resin, and you coat it completely. So it essentially becomes an encapsulated piece of wood, not susceptible to water intrusion should any get there. The other thing you do is you actually bond it to the other piece of the bulkhead so it becomes one unified piece, taking the load and strength that it's required. This is a joke, quite frankly. We'll go down below and take a look at that. All right, in an effort to do some orientation, right, here's obviously the companionway steps, and we were working in that section right there where you see the hole in the ceiling. So let's, I'm going to kind of come over here and just show you. So there's the opening that we just cut. I want to bring your attention to this. So as I mentioned, we had noticed before, and we believe this was a section where we had some termite issues. It appears that this piece goes right to here. I am going to take this off of here, but seriously, look at this. It would explain why the aft door to the stateroom doesn't quite sit correctly. It's probably reduced. It's probably lowered just a tad, made it a bit off kilter. So let me pull this decorative teak exterior trim off of here and see what we have. Hopefully that problem that is right here, and you can see it kind of there's a definitive line where it starts to go. Hopefully it doesn't go beyond that. But what's interesting is if this was a repair, it's what led me to believe maybe there's a chance that the repair that was done was had termites in it, right? The wood that he used might have had termites. It's clearly not done in a way you would typically do a marine scarf with an infused piece of polyester resin or epoxy resin wood. There's so nothing to it. Just to give you an idea, there's the teak trim that's on the back side of this. And again, somebody used plywood and never even so much as put a resin on it. All right, I'm down below. I went ahead and came into the aft stateroom, which is just aft of the galley. So essentially the bulkhead that I was just looking at is the dividing wall between these two. From up above, I mentioned the methodology of how the compression from the mizzen is supported. Came down below, I wanted to remove all the teak trim and whatnot down below so I could really kind of take a look at this.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
And inspect how everything was going. And what I found was there were some supports that had been put up just essentially to hold some trim to hide the ugly framing structure in there. That noise you just heard was actually the piece of trim that I removed and just had barely sitting up there in place. It just fell, and of course it went down through the opening in the floor and is down underneath the prop shaft. So I'm going to have to hang upside down from my waist and get that out. But let me show you what we have in here just to, I don't know, show you, and then I got to do some contemplation and think about how I actually go about resolving this. All right, let's talk a little bit about what we've done. So you can see the hole in the ceiling that we cut from above, and you can see the section that I removed of the top of that bulkhead that I just showed a minute ago. Interestingly enough, as I look down here to see how bad is it beyond that section, see how well I can do this with two hands, this is clearly still rotted. And just to give you an idea on how rotted, here, with a screwdriver, and if I were to go right down to these steps, let's see, screwdriver here, I probably shouldn't be able to do that, right? That's my guess. That's just rotted completely. A little more solid here, but frankly, this needs to it needs a new bulkhead piece, either full bulkhead or scarfed in. All the way down below this first step, I'm still a little soft here. I get solid right about there, and I'm fine the rest of the way down. Forgive all the dust here from the sanding and work. So let me kind of go into the back stateroom and show what it looks like from the other side. So I'm now in the stateroom, and I'm looking the other way at this same exact section. You can see the hole in the bulkhead right there, and then you can see again the back side of that rot. There's that bulkhead. What's interesting is we have this horizontal beam here that runs all the way back. Going off of that horizontal beam is a vertical beam that goes up, and you can see a nice rabbet joint here. And this is a big solid beam that goes all the way across. That's the back side, aft side of the compression framework I mentioned on the mizzen mast. This all seems good. I do have a question though, and that is, what's holding the forward end of this horizontal beam up? Certainly it wasn't just bolted into or screwed into that bulkhead, but it certainly begs the question, and I'll probably come in here with a jack, an extension, a 2x4, and lift up on this and see if this moves at all. And if so, I may do a little digging underneath to see. It may be supported right here by this inner bulkhead. I just have to see what the framework looks like underneath here. That's probably the case, but we need to see. mainly because this is taking a lot of downward force from the weight of the mizzen, and the shroud's pulling down on it. I want to make sure that going downward, it's a good, solid foundation, essentially. All right. I'm now looking straight up, so the camera is at about waist level, looking up toward the ceiling, which is right above me. And what I'm going to show you here is, let me kind of come over. This is that vertical compression post, and I'm moving upward toward the ceiling. This right here going across is actually that horizontal beam that's on the aft side of the mizzen compression framework. This lighter colored piece of wood is really just a thin piece of luan and was used to essentially provide a small spacer for the trim work that was on it. On the forward side of this, you can see these beams I was talking about here that run horizontally across this to take the load off of that mizzen mast. What you're seeing here, these screw holes, are actually where the large teak block that sits up on the roof and sits underneath the compression post, that's where that is essentially bolted to this piece of wood up above. So that gives you a little orientation of what all this looks like down here from a framework perspective. For what it's worth, my gut is telling me I should clean all this up, remove this piece of wood here, and essentially scarf a new piece in here, actually epoxying it right to this inner hardwood frame and also to the inside of this piece of framework. But I really want to consult a second opinion on this, just because it seems like a fairly critical area of the boat. One, at the fore end of the compression framework for the mizzen, at the edge of the companionway right here, and also this framework going into the rear stateroom. It just seems like a multifunctional piece, and I just want to make sure that it's the right one. It's done correctly. I am impressed with the joinery on this boat. I've always been. I mean, through the opening, I'm showing you the backside of that horizontal beam that takes the load of the mizzen compression post. And what's interesting is you can see how it has that rabbeted edge to support the framework above it as well. Very well constructed. So after inspecting that bulkhead down below, I said I was going to come up and sort of clean this all up. I want to kind of show you what it looks like. I'm zooming out again just to sort of give you an indication of where we are. But you can see here I have removed the inner layer of core here where it was a problem. This is where that opening was that we were looking at from down below. And for the most part, this is fairly clean. Obviously, I'd cleaned it with acetone before I was epoxying another layer down. And I made the edges square where the old core was good, and I'd butt it right up against that. What I'm still a little bit concerned about is it still appears that I have a little bit of rot or loose wood, delaminated plywood, underneath the mizzen step, and that doesn't sound to me like a good solution, despite the fact that the framework and all is really solid. If that ½ inch or so or 3/4 inch of plywood is spongy, that's given a little bit of play and not building a significant and stable rig, I guess. At least that's what my head's thinking. So I've got to do a little contemplation on this. I'm going to consult with Mike Myers, the yacht service here, and see if he has some recommendations. And I'll also check with a couple of folks whose opinions I certainly respect. So, well, as you can tell, it definitely is some contemplation at this point. We're not exactly sure what we're going to do. I've got a meeting with Michael at the yacht services to kind of go over my options. Quite frankly, I'm not sure yet what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to make a few more openings in the roof of the coach house, see if my problem is beyond just this area I've uncovered, and from that, I think we can make some decisions over whether or not we essentially put an entire new roof on the coach house, or we try and repair the areas that are bad. So a lot more to come there. Really do appreciate you guys watching. Please do give the video a thumbs up. Go ahead and click the subscribe button and the little bell notification to make sure that you get notified when we upload new videos. And if you enjoy it, by all means, subscribe to the channel and check out our other 2 videos you'll see right here on the screen. Thanks, everybody.